My name is Margaret Whitaker. I am 62 years old, a retired librarian, and until 3 days ago, I believed the worst thing that ever happened to me was losing my husband on a rainy night in 1995. I was wrong. 3 days ago, my daughter tried to bury me alive, behind the cabin where I taught her to tie her shoes, where we pressed autumn leaves in butcher paper, where her father and I carved our initials under the porch rail. She smiled and shoveled while her husband packed down the dirt. If you think that sounds impossible, I need you to breathe with me. We're going to start at the beginning, and when we get to Willow Creek, I want you to listen closely, because the water isn't the only thing moving under that town. I grew up in Willow Creek, 3 stoplights and a feed store, where folks knew your secrets by the way you folded your grocery sacks. I ran the children's room at the library for 31 years. If you ever visited, you'd remember the wooden whale that dangled from the ceiling, the blue rug in the corner, the basket of paper crowns for quiet kings and queens. I made that room a harbor for kids whose worlds roared louder than they could explain. I married Thomas Whitaker when I was 21. He had a laugh you could hear from the hardware aisle and hands that could fix anything except old grief. He ran a small surveying business, the kind of work that keeps you between property lines and prying eyes. We had one child, Elaine, dark hair, sharp mind, a delicate way of carrying anger like it might break if she set it down. Thomas died, or so we were told, on a stormy Thursday in October 1995, out past the old logging road where Willow Creek splits and the alder roots claw at the bank. They called it an accident. They said the current took him. They never found his body. I wore black for a season and then gray for years. I learned how to sleep on the cold side of the bed. I learned how to be 2 parents piled into one chair at a school play. I learned how to soak fear in dishwater and pretend it was gone. I did not learn how to stop expecting him to walk through the door. Elaine moved away after college to Portland, then came back at 30 with a husband named Caleb Harper. He wore work boots like a costume and called me ma'am in a way that made me feel like I'd been seated at the kids' table. They said they wanted a slower life and bought a fixer-upper with a view of the creek and a backyard full of blackberry thorns. Caleb started Harper Homeworks, a patchwork business, fence building, kitchen gut jobs, structural this and that, as he put it. He could talk anyone into a handshake and a deposit. He just didn't always bring jobs to the finish line. They gave me grandchildren, Noah and Lily, with sandy hair and knees always bruised from earnest living. And for a while, I believed the story every grandmother wants to believe, that we had found our way back to something gentler. Then came the papers. "Mom," Elaine said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "Caleb and I were thinking, it's time you don't have to worry about anything. If something happened," she glanced at the old photo of Thomas on the sideboard, "we'd be ready. We should update your will, maybe add a power of attorney." She smiled the way people smile before they tell you the bad part won't hurt. "I'm 62, not 92, I said lightly. "I can still sign my own checks." "Of course." Her tone softened like butter over heat. "But you know the cabin costs money just to sit there. Taxes, maintenance, we could help manage it. And Mom, think about selling. The market's high." The cabin. The one Thomas's father built with rough-cut cedar, high on the hill above Willow Creek where the wind learned our names. I had not slept there since '95, but I would not sell it. It wasn't a house to me. It was a promise I wasn't ready to break. Caleb cleared his throat. "We'll do whatever you want, Margaret. Just, it's smart to get ahead of these things. God forbid your memory starts slipping or you have a fall." I laughed, and it sounded like ice in a glass. "I keep a ledger. It's a habit from the library. Ink lines calm me. I reconcile statements once a month, a ritual of order against creeping chaos. In April, a number winked wrong at me. $40 missing, then 300, then 68. Small enough to be noise, large enough to be a whisper. I called First Willamette Credit. The man on the phone said, "You authorized an automatic transfer to Harper Homeworks last fall, Mrs. Whitaker." "I did not." He cleared his throat. "I have the form here. Signature looks, well, it looks like yours. It did not look like mine." I hung up and sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup. I thought of the day Elaine brought Caleb over for dinner, the way he rested his elbows on my table like he had the right. I thought of the night Thomas left and the mangled timeline we built around his absence, and I thought of Willow Creek, of how it swallows what you give it and asks for more. I confronted Elaine first. She cried angry tears and blamed clerical errors. Caleb apologized so smoothly I felt foolish for not apologizing to him. He promised to fix it, to call the bank, to reverse the transfers. 2 weeks later, another amount went missing, then another. If you've ever had termites, you know the house looks fine until your foot goes through the floor. I drove to the cabin for the first time in years, white knuckles on the wheel, the road unspooling like a ribbon from my chest. The key stuck in the lock. The air smelled like cedar and dust and summers that never learned to leave. I went to the bedroom Thomas and I shared, the one with the window that looks over the creek's bend where the water slows, then decides again. I knew exactly where to kneel. Old grief is a compass. I pulled up the loose floorboard Thomas had joked about fixing. Beneath it, a cigar tin, rusted and stubborn. Inside the tin, a cassette tape labeled in my husband's careful block print, "If I don't come back." A folded surveyor's map with red grease pencil X's that marched along the creek like a patient army. A letter with my name. Mags, read if you have to. I sat on the floor and unfolded my past with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Mags, if you're reading this, I made someone angry enough to hire a current. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm home and this is just a bad story. But if I'm not, listen to me. There's a pit under Willow Creek. Caldwell and Sons have been burying barrels out past mile marker 7. The river swells when it rains and eats what it can, but the rest sits. I told Roy Harper I was going to the state. He told me he'd see me put under before he saw a fine. If something happens, don't trust the sheriff. Don't tell Elaine, and don't go to the cabin alone. I love you, I love you, I love you. Thomas Roy Harper, Caleb's father. I didn't know whether to vomit or run. I did neither. I found an old Walkman in a drawer beneath quilts that smelled like road trips and Lucky Charms. I clicked the tape to life. Thomas's voice poured into the room, alive in a way that made the air thin. Test, test. Okay, Mags, if I'm not home in an hour, leave. Don't wait by the phone. Roy showed me the barrels. He laughed when I pulled out the camera, said the river would do the burying for him. I told him I called a friend at the state. He smiled like a wolf that's already eaten. If someone tells you I drowned, believe the part about water, not the accident. The tape stopped. It had been recorded the night he died. I sat on the floorboards until the room went blue and the creek turned the color of old pennies. When I finally stood, my knees cracked like ice. When I got back to the house that night, Elaine was waiting on the porch with a bag from the bakery and an apology rehearsed behind her eyes. Mom, I'm sorry about earlier. Caleb talked to the bank. They said it's fixed. Also, she held up a manila envelope. We found a great estate attorney. Saturday, we'll drive you out to the cabin, do a fresh inventory for insurance, make a day of it. Lily wants to gather pine cones. Doesn't that sound like fun? Lily had a recorder concert Saturday. She knew that. She'd set it like a dare. Bring your old documents, Elaine added, casual as a cat watching a bird. Dad's papers. The deed. You know. My hands prickled. Why? So we can scan everything at once? It's practical. I told her I was tired. I told her we'd talk. I did not tell her about the cassette in my cardigan pocket, or the letter folded under my left sleeve like a bandage. That night I slept with the light on, Thomas's voice turning over in the soft machine of my memory. Don't tell Elaine. The words scratched at the door of my chest until I understood them, not because she was guilty then, but because fear grows sideways. Fear had grown sideways in my daughter. In the morning, I drove to the Bluefin Diner where secrets go to cool. At the counter, Ruth Porter, who's poured me coffee since before Elaine could say refill, leaned on her elbows and lowered her voice. You look like someone used your heart as a doormat. Do you remember Roy Harper? I asked. Ruth snorted. The man who tried to buy the town with dirty baseball caps and a checkbook? He left in '97, pack of lawyers nipping his heels. What did he do? Dumped his problems where the creek can't tattle. Did he know Thomas? Ruth watched my face like she was reading the patron code I kept pinned to the library wall. Honey, Roy knew everyone, and folks who wouldn't say their prayers for him said them after. I showed her the letter. She didn't touch it, respectful the way Southerners are with graveyards. Ruth came from Arkansas and never let Oregon change her vowels. You need to speak to Detective Marissa Klein in Corvallis, she said. Not the sheriff. Klein doesn't mind stepping on necks if the boot fits. And Margaret? Yes? Don't go anywhere alone with Caleb. Roy's fruit fell close to that tree. The rain started in earnest, needles on a tin roof. I looked out the window and watched the creek fatten. In Willow Creek, rain doesn't just wet things, it wakes them. Friday night, Elaine cooked dinner at my house for the first time in months. Noah set out plates with spaceship precision. Lily slipped a pine cone in my cardigan pocket and told me it was armor. After dinner, Elaine spread forms on the table: living will, power of attorney, words that dress like care but sometimes undress as control. She kept saying streamline and peace of mind. Caleb kept saying just in case. I signed the updated will, dividing everything equally between Elaine and the grandkids' trust, but I left the cabin out. I said I needed time to decide. Caleb's jaw ticked. At 9:30, they put Lily's coat on and made a show of checking the back door lock, the way good people do. Before he left, Caleb tucked a business card in the fruit bowl. Apex Estate Services, he said. They can clean the cabin, haul the junk. Professionals, fully bonded. We scheduled them for Monday. Just a consult. He winked. I smiled the way women smile when we don't want to start a war at our own table. Close to midnight, I pulled the tape player from my nightstand drawer and pressed rewind, then play. Mags, if I'm late, it's because I had to drive by the cabin. Somebody followed me from the creek. If the porch light burns out, it's not because the bulb breathed its last. I'm leaving the map where you'll find it. X marks the drums. If I'm gone, don't give the cabin to Elaine no matter how sweet she asks. She'll marry trouble someday. She'll think she can fix it. It'll fix her instead. I love you. I love you. I love you. I thought of the last photo I had of Thomas. He's in a flannel shirt with a bend in the collar, pointing to something just out of frame. Elaine is 5, cheeks apple bright, reaching for the same air. It was taken in the garden behind the cabin near the old willow stump. When the photo was printed, there was a smudge across the bottom, like a thumb dragged through wet clay. I hadn't noticed that smudge in years. Now I couldn't stop seeing it. A thumbprint in dirt where clean hands don't belong. Saturday, the sky wore a bruise. Elaine insisted on bringing Noah and Lily to make it a family day. Caleb loaded the truck with shovels, heavy-duty contractor bags, and a battery saw for clearing branches. You never know what you'll find after a windstorm, he said. He smelled like cologne laid over nerves. We took the back road along the creek. As we passed mile marker 7, Lily pressed her face to the glass and said, "The water looks sleepy." "It's deep there," Caleb said. "Steeper banks." Noah asked if we'd see fish. I said we might. I did not tell him that a creek can swallow more than trout. At the cabin, Noah and Lily ran for the porch swing like it had been saving the last sway for them. Elaine led me inside. Caleb told the kids he'd show them how to dig for treasure after lunch. "Where?" I asked. He pointed behind the house toward the old willow stump, now a mounded flower bed with a ring of flat stones. "Right there," he said, casual as a gun at a picnic. "Ground soft. Good place to plant." My mouth tasted like pennies. We ate ham sandwiches that chewed like paper. I cleaned up slowly, listening to the yard. Caleb's shovel bit the earth. The sound traveled through the floorboards to the base of my skull. Noah giggled when he found an old marble. Lily sang to a pine cone family she arranged on the porch rail. When I stepped outside, Elaine was standing near the mound in work gloves that didn't suit her hands. "Mom," she said, voice light as a coat 2 sizes too small. "Caleb thinks the bed is overgrown. We're going to turn the soil, make it nice for spring. Could you grab the hose nozzle from the shed?" There was no hose hooked up. The spigot had been dry since 2009. I walked past the mound and felt the ground settle under my heels. not just soft, disturbed. Caleb drove the shovel down again, deeper, then stopped. "Rock," he said. He crouched, pulled out a flat stone and tossed it aside. He drove the shovel again, then again, a rhythm like a heartbeat you don't want to hear. "Mom," Elaine said brightly, "come closer. You can tell us where you want the new garden, maybe some of Dad's favorite—" What were those? Shasta daisies? I moved forward. Caleb's shovel struck something with a hollow knock. He froze. Our eyes met across the mound and did not see each other. He went to one knee and brushed dirt aside with his gloved hand. Plastic, thick, black contractor plastic, folded back over something long and narrow. Caleb looked at Elaine. She looked at me. "Mom," she said softly, "do you remember if Dad buried tools back here?" "Yes," I said. "He buried a truth." I turned and walked toward the porch steps. Caleb lunged and grabbed my elbow, hard enough to leave a story. He smiled wide enough to show the part of him that never learned to hide. "Stay," he said. "Family project." "Caleb," I said, "let go." He did. He shoved his shovel into the mound again and worked the plastic free, hauling out a long, heavy bundle. The shape made my knees loosen. It was a tarp-wrapped something the size and shape of a man. "Kids," Elaine called, sugar-sweet and rattled. "Let's go inside and help Grandma find cookies." Noah frowned. "But the treasure, inside," she said, voice sharp enough to cut the air. They went. I stood, the world turning slow as a clock in a church. Caleb slit the plastic with a utility knife. He peeled back layers, tarp, canvas, mildewed fabric. Inside was not a body. Inside was wood, a cedar chest, old and damp, with iron bands and a padlock that had rusted with patience. Caleb whooped, a sound too close to feral. "Jackpot," he said. Elaine's pupils pinned. She spoke without moving her mouth. "Careful." Caleb pried at the lock with the shovel's blade until metal gave. He lifted the lid. Inside, bundled papers, a camera, 3 mason jars sealed with wax, and a manila folder with Thomas's handwriting. Caldwell. Copies. Caleb's shoulders dropped like a man who's been carrying a boulder and finally set it down, but the boulder rolled back. He flipped through the folder, slower now. The pages were invoices, shipping manifests, a hand-drawn map that matched the one in my kitchen drawer, photographs of barrels half buried at mile 7, men with Caldwell and Sons logos on their jackets. In 2 photos, Roy Harper smiled into the camera like a mistake that thinks it's a memory. Caleb's voice went tight. "Where'd he get this?" "Your father showed him," I said, "and then tried to put him under." Elaine stared at the jars. "What's in those?" I didn't answer. I already knew. Soil cores. Thomas taught me to label them the summer we dated, just to have a reason to stand close at the tailgate. These were marked in his hand. M7A, M7B, M7C, mile 7, A, B, C. Caleb closed the lid gently and then looked at me like he was remembering where he was and who I was to him. "You're going to give this to me," he said, "before someone who doesn't love you gets here first." "Who would that be?" "The people who paid my father, the ones who don't care if a creek runs black as long as the books stay green." Elaine's voice was a scrape. "Caleb, not now," he hissed. He stepped close. "You'll sign the cabin over. You'll hand me the chest. Then we'll burn what we don't need to sell. And your grandchildren will grow up with you knitting in the corner instead of lying under this bed." "Caleb," I said. "No," he smiled. "Not the kind that reaches eyes, the kind that shows you where the cliff is. Then we'll plant a different kind of garden." He dragged the chest toward the back door, waved for Elaine to help. She didn't move. "Elaine," he said, giving her the voice he used on men who signed checks. She flinched and grabbed one handle. They hauled it into the living room and set it on the rug under the window where the sun makes a square in the afternoons. Noah and Lily hovered in the hall, faces pale. "Kids," I said gently, "go pick pine cones for Grandma, 10 of your best, no more, no less." They looked at their mother. She nodded. They ran. Caleb pulled duct tape from his tool bag. The sound of it tearing was indecent. He tossed a roll to Elaine. "Hands, ankles." Elaine stared at the tape like she'd never seen it, as if it had just been invented to test her. "Don't," she whispered to him, and then louder, to herself, to the wall, to me. "Don't." Caleb held her eyes. It was the longest conversation I've ever seen two people have without words. Then she turned to me with hands made of wet paper. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, and reached. I didn't fight. There are battles you win by losing. I let the tape snake around my wrists, felt the tack of it kiss skin. I let my knees wobble to soften the fall. Caleb taped my ankles, then my mouth. Not tight enough to panic, tight enough to explain the plan. He pulled contractor plastic from his bag, shook it open, spread it across the living room floor like a stage. "Elaine," he said, "get the shovel." She looked at the ceiling, at the photo of Thomas above the mantel, at her hands. "Caleb, please." "Get the shovel." She moved. The sound of her footsteps was the loneliest thing I've ever heard. Caleb lifted me under the arms. For a man who lived on promises more than protein, he was strong. He carried me toward the back door, out across the porch, down the steps, over to the mounded bed. He set me beside the hole he'd already started, rectangular, neat as a window. "Fits," he said softly, admiring his own math. He looked at Elaine. "Help me." They slid me into the shallow pit. The soil was damp and cold and smelled like mornings that used to be ours. I stared up at the sky and begged it to change. Caleb began to push dirt over my legs. "Caleb," Elaine hissed, "the kids, in the woods, they won't see. Someone will drive by. No one drives this road if they don't have to." He was right. That was the worst part. He pushed more earth. It hit the tape over my mouth and called itself a kiss. "Mom," Elaine whispered, "I'm sorry." I turned my head to look at her. I stared until she blinked. I wanted my eyes to be a mirror, so she could see exactly who was watching and what she was doing. She looked away. Caleb wiped sweat with the back of his wrist. He scooped, packed. He worked like a man who never had to work for anything real. The dirt rose to my ribs. You don't survive 3 decades in a small-town library without learning a trick or two. People think librarians are safe because we know where everything is. They forget that means we also know where everything isn't. I'd come to the cabin prepared. In the bathroom drawer, beneath a stack of guest towels, I'd taped an old iPhone Lily used as a toy, a model with a battery that somehow holds a charge. I'd set it to record before we left for the cabin and slid it under the living room couch when Elaine went to get napkins. Always leave a witness, even a digital one. And after I found Thomas's tape, I'd tucked his letter in the pocket of my cardigan and fastened the pocket with 2 safety pins. The letter crackled against my ribs now like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. Caleb shoveled. Elaine breathed like a person trying to pretend. When the dirt reached my collarbones, I turned my face just enough to get one nostril in open air. Caleb didn't notice. He was in his own storm. He tossed another shovelful. It spattered my cheeks, found the corners of my eyes. The world narrowed. And then I heard a sound I have come to believe was God clearing his throat. A buzz from inside, thin as a mosquito, insistent as a hymn. Caleb paused. Was that... Elaine blinked, calculating the distance between consequence and denial. Probably the kids. Check. She set the shovel down and walked toward the house. Her gait was wrong. Too straight, like she'd decided something that hurt. Caleb scooped again, faster now, as if speed could outrun sound. Elaine stepped through the door. The house swallowed her. I lay very still. I set my mind to cataloging the sky. 4 clouds, 1 hawk, a blue so pale it might be shy. The dirt rose to my chin. Then, screaming. Elaine's voice from inside, a note I hadn't heard since she was 8 and realized I couldn't fix the mean girls with cupcakes. "Caleb!" He froze. The shovel fell, handle first, a hollow thud against wood. He jogged to the door and vanished. I lay there, chin in soil, heart loud enough to teach a marching band. I counted to 30, not because 30 meant anything, but because 30 is a number you can hold. Footsteps, a struggle, a crash like a table making a point, Caleb's voice snarling, Elaine's voice pleading, and then, Noah, Dad, stop hurting Mom. Lily, Grandma's under the dirt. The house went quiet in a way that didn't feel like silence. It felt like aim. Caleb burst out the door, eyes wild, a crowbar in his hand. "Get the kids in the truck," he told Elaine. "Now." "No," she cried. She stood on the porch with the iPhone in her fist, the screen lit like a saint. "I listened to it, Caleb. I heard your father on that tape from the chest, bragging. I heard you and Dad on the voicemail you forgot to delete last month, talking about how the old lady will fold if you press the right bruise. I heard everything." Caleb laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "You don't know what you heard." "I heard you," she said, quiet now. "That's enough." He took a step toward her. Noah stood at her leg, chin trembling, holding a pine cone like it was a sword. Lily hid behind the doorframe, eyes wide as summer. "Give me the phone," Caleb said. Elaine squeezed it tighter. "No." He moved, sudden and ugly. He grabbed her wrist. She twisted away. The phone fell, smacked the porch, bounced, slid, and came to rest face down near the edge of the steps, still recording. Caleb swore, shoved her hard enough to rock the railing. He lunged for the phone. And that was when Thomas Whitaker saved my life for the second time. A siren's cry rose from down the road. Not Willow Creek Sheriff. A different tone. A county car, or two. Caleb glanced toward the sound, then toward me, then at Elaine. He did a math I couldn't see. "How?" he said. Elaine lifted her chin. "Mom turned on Find Me on the old iPhone last night. She stuck it under the couch. I sent Detective Klein the link. And the neighbor's trail cam? It pings cell alerts when it catches motion. I borrowed it. I set it to notify." Her voice broke. "I thought I could stop you before we ever got here. I was wrong. So I called Klein from the truck when you were in the shed." Caleb snarled something that wasn't a word. He sprinted toward the mound, toward me, crowbar raised, not to dig, but to finish. He reached the edge, and Elaine, my daughter who used to collect chicken feathers and stack them like a deck of quiet cards, tackled him from behind. It wasn't elegant. It didn't have to be. They went down hard, the crowbar skidding across dirt. Noah shouted. Lily cried. The siren swelled. I worked my arms against the tape until the skin burned and the glue complained. I twisted my wrists small, the way they taught us in self-defense class at the library when a patron got grabby with a clerk. The tape gave. My hands came free. I ripped the tape from my mouth and breathed like I meant it. "Noah! Lily!" I called. "The kitchen drawer! Blue handle! Scissors! Hurry!" Noah ran. Lily followed, brave on wobbling legs. Caleb rolled to his knees, shoved Elaine aside, lunged for the crowbar again. Elaine scrambled, grabbed his ankle. He kicked her, a move so cruel it sucked the air from the yard. He raised the crowbar. I curled onto my side, dug my elbows, heaved my torso like I was a fish beating the deck. Dirt cascaded into my mouth, grit grinding my teeth. I spit and heaved again. Noah burst from the kitchen with the blue-handled scissors above his head like a trophy. He slid down the porch steps on his seat, ran to the mound, tripped, skinned a knee, kept going. He thrust the scissors into my hand. I cut my ankles free, then dug like a woman who had a husband who told the truth and a daughter who lost the difference between love and need. The deputy hit the yard first, gun drawn, voice amplified by authority I could finally respect. "Hands where I can see them!" Caleb hesitated. Then he did the thing men like him always do when they know they're not the smartest person in the yard. He ran. He sprinted for the woods, toward the creek, toward mile marker 7 and the things that waited under the water. 2 more cruisers slid into the drive. Detective Marissa Klein stepped out of an unmarked car like she'd been waiting 2 decades to be invited. "Let him run," she said to the deputy. "He's going to take us where the barrels are." She looked at me. At the mound, at Elaine on her knees, hair in her face, crying in a way that didn't need an audience. "You must be Margaret," Klein said. "I am," I said, wiping dirt from my tongue with the back of my hand. "And I have a tape you need to hear." They loaded me onto a stretcher and tucked a blanket around my shoulders like I was a child who had done something brave. I told them no hospital until the chest was safe. The letter was in a bag. The kids were buckled into a cruiser with a teddy bear in each lap. Detective Klein knelt beside me, and I saw a landscape of tired in her eyes that matched my own. "You did good," she said. "I'm sorry it took this long." "Don't be sorry to me," I said. "Be sorry to the creek." She stood, snapped her fingers at a deputy. "Get that chest to evidence, bag everything, photograph the site, and somebody find me Roy Harper if he's not already smoke on a highway." They found Caleb 2 hours later, knee-deep in black water where the bank sloughed off like old bread. He'd tried to cross and misjudged the current. He clung to a root and screamed names that weren't prayers. When they pulled him onto the bank, his face collapsed. The deputy cuffed him. He stopped screaming and started talking. He gave them names. He gave them numbers. He gave them Roy, where he was, who he called, how much he took. While they brought Caleb up the bank, hazmat teams moved past us. Yellow suits, steady hands. They waded into the creek at mile 7 with probes and cameras. The first barrel they found was wedged like a confession at the waterline. The second burped chemical breath when they jostled it. The third had been ripped open by a log and had been feeding the creek slow poison for years. Ruth Porter showed up in her apron like she'd service coffee between miracles. She handed me a cup and I held it with both hands. It tasted like relief. Elaine sat on the tailgate of a cruiser, blanket around her shoulders, Noah under one arm, Lily under the other. She stared at her knees and said nothing for a very long time. When she finally looked at me, her face was a geography I didn't recognize. Grief had planted flags in places love used to camp. "I knew about the money," she said, voice husked by truth. "Not the barrels, the loans, the threats. Dad," she swallowed, "Caleb told me he could fix it if he had access to your equity. He said we'd lose the house. He said the kids—" She bent her head to Lily's hair and breathed. "He said I was ungrateful when I hesitated. He said I was cold. He said I always put you first." Thomas's letter burned against my ribs through the safety pins. Don't tell Elaine. He hadn't been calling her guilty. He'd been calling her breakable. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Elaine said. "I'm asking to help." "You will," I said. "It will hurt." She nodded like a person agreeing to surgery. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek became a headline people said like a dare. Caldwell and Sons under investigation, illegal dumping linked to 1995 disappearance. They found Roy Harper in a rented ranch house near Medford, holding a bag and a lie. He didn't come quietly. Men like him never do. But he came. Detective Klein sat me in a soundproof room and slid earphones over my hair and pressed play on the cassette. Thomas's voice filled a space it had been denied for 30 years. She listened to the whole thing without blinking. "This is evidence and elegy," she said. In court, the prosecutor played snippets. The part about the barrels, about Roy's threat, about not trusting the sheriff. They played a clip of Caleb from the iPhone under the couch, his voice saying, "You'll sign the cabin over. We'll burn what we don't need." They played a voicemail he'd left his father 2 months ago. "The old woman will fold if we press the right bruise." The jury leaned forward like a congregation. Elaine testified. She did not pretty it. She told the truth until it looked naked. She didn't cry until the judge called recess. Then she cried like something had been cut out and the body finally understood. Caleb took a plea. He tried to sell his father for a shorter sentence. Roy tried to sell everyone else. The gavel came down on felony dumping, conspiracy, attempted murder, and, 30 years late, homicide for Thomas Whitaker's death. In the hallway after the verdict, Detective Klein put a hand on my shoulder. "You kept a library in a town that wanted to forget. Thank you." I told her I hadn't done it alone. I pointed to Noah with his blue scissors, Lily with her pinecone armor, Ruth with her apron prayers, Elaine with her shattered, stubborn heart. "You did one thing no one else could," Klein said. "You stayed." We never moved back into the cabin. The state claimed it for remediation, and I let them. Some places you save by leaving. Back in town, the library hosted a fundraiser. The board voted to build a reading garden in the courtyard, Thomas Whitaker Reading Garden. We set out benches carved by men who knew how to be gentle, and a little plaque that said, "Listen to the water." Lily helped me plant Shasta daisies along the edge. Noah built a birdhouse that listed to one side like a joke that didn't know it was funny. Elaine showed up early and left late for a month. She didn't ask where to stand. She watched and found a place. People brought jars of clear creek water from up above mile 7 to pour into the fountain we installed, just a bowl on a pedestal. The first time the water tipped from the spout and into itself, the sound was so clean I had to sit down. At home, Elaine and the kids moved into my house for a while. We slept like normal people. We put cereal bowls in the sink and sometimes waited until after lunch to wash them. We tried out words like safe and soon and next summer. One night, Noah brought me the pine cone he'd called Armor and set it on my nightstand. "Keep it," he said. "In case." "I will." He climbed onto the bed and leaned against my arm in that frank way kids trust the grown-ups who have earned it. "Grandma, is the creek going to be mad at us forever?" "No," I said. "Creeks don't stay mad. They remember." He nodded, like that made good sense, and slid down to the rug where Lily had lined up a dozen pine cones like a parade. Some evenings, when the light gets tired but won't admit it, I sit on the porch swing with a blanket over my knees and talk to Thomas. I don't mean out loud. Not always. Sometimes yes. "I found your letter," I tell him. "I found the map. I found the creek you saved." "Elaine is learning to hold her own hands," I say. "She's not ready to forgive herself. I'm not ready to let her. We meet in the middle." Noah is counting everything. Lily sings to pine cones and they listen. Marissa Klein says hi. Ruth says I should learn to play cards. I run my fingers along the underside of the porch rail until they catch in the groove where Thomas carved our initials a week after we married, T+M, in a hurry, because he had to go fix something small that turned into something big. The wood is smooth, the letters shallower than memory. The night air smells like water and cut grass and the kind of forgiveness that doesn't require forgetting. Sometimes I imagine Roy Harper sitting in a concrete box with a bed that doesn't give, counting the days like he can bargain time. I don't think about him long. The creek took that from me, and I am grateful. 3 days ago, my daughter tried to bury me behind a cabin where we once buried bulbs and believed flowers would come. She will spend the rest of her life learning the difference between planting and hiding. So will I. I had practiced the final line of this story for 30 years and never expected to say it this way. Thomas, you were right. The sheriff couldn't be trusted then. The creek could. And the thing you asked me to do, the thing you knew would be hardest, I did it. I stayed. I stayed long enough to see the water run clearer. I stayed long enough to hear our grandson count to 30 without looking for permission. I stayed long enough to look my daughter in the face and call her home, even when she wasn't ready to answer the door. If you're listening, if you're anywhere beneath Willow Creek or above it, if your laugh still fits in the hardware aisle of heaven, know this: I love you, I love you, I love you, and I am not afraid of the water anymore.